I was 6 when my parents adopted me. 16 years later, I thought I knew what family meant until I overheard my parents and sister telling my 6-year-old niece that she'd end up back at the orphanage if she misbehaved, just like they used to tell me. The same threat that gave me nightmares for years. I stood frozen in the hallway, hearing my niece's tiny voice ask, like Aunt Emma? And my sister laughed. Exactly. In that moment, something inside me shattered, and something else hardened into resolve. They had no idea I discovered their generosity came with strings attached, a trust fund from my biological grandmother they'd been secretly accessing for years, a fund meant for me. As I watched my niece's eyes fill with tears, I knew exactly what I had to do. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, I became the perfect daughter. I had to be. The Wilsons, Margaret and Robert, made it clear that my place in their family was conditional. "We chose you, Emma," my mother would remind me whenever I stepped out of line. "We can unchoose you, too." My sister Bethany, their biological child, was 3 years older and never let me forget I was different. I learned early on to make myself small, to be grateful, to never complain. The first time I heard about the orphanage was after I spilled juice on our cream-colored carpet during a dinner party. I was 7. My mother gripped my arm in the bathroom afterward, hissing that ungrateful children get sent back. I had nightmares for weeks. Our house in Fairfield County looked perfect from the outside. Colonial style, manicured lawn, American flag by the porch. My parents were pillars of the community. Dad ran a successful insurance firm. Mom was on every PTA and charity board possible. At church on Sundays, people would comment on how blessed I was to have been saved by such a wonderful family. If only they knew. Thanksgiving was always the worst. Extended family would gather, and inevitably, someone would comment on how I didn't look like a Wilson. My cousin Jason once asked loudly why my hair was so dark when everyone else was blonde. Aunt Patricia chimed in that I should be grateful the Wilsons took in a half-Mexican child. I was 12 then, staring at my plate while everyone discussed my origins like I was a stray dog. Bethany weaponized my adoption constantly. When we fought over clothes or toys, her final blow was always, "At least I belong here." Once, when I was 14, I made the mistake of outperforming her at a piano recital. The teacher praised my natural talent. That night, Bethany sneaked into my room and whispered, "Mom and Dad are talking about sending you back. They think you're showing off too much." Despite everything, I excelled. Perfect grades, volunteer work, piano competitions. I built my escape route brick by brick. When I got accepted to Columbia on a scholarship, my parents threw a party. Not for me, I realized later, but for themselves, to showcase their successful project. That night, Robert cornered me in the kitchen and said, "We invested a lot in you. Don't forget that." What nobody knew was that 3 months earlier, I'd received a strange letter. An attorney from Arizona had tracked me down, explaining that my biological grandmother, Elena Vasquez, had passed away. She'd been searching for me for years, having lost touch with my mother after she moved north. Elena had left me a trust fund, a substantial one. The attorney explained that as my legal guardians, the Wilsons had been receiving quarterly statements and payments for my chair and education since I was 8 years old. Money that had clearly gone into their new vacation home in Vermont and Bethany's failed business ventures. Money that was rightfully mine. I said nothing, but began planning. I would graduate, move out, and then decide what to do about this betrayal. Then came last Christmas. My niece Lily, Bethany's daughter, had come into my life like a tiny miracle. She reminded me so much of myself. Dark hair, serious eyes, always trying to please everyone. Bethany had gotten pregnant in college, married Lily's father briefly, then divorced. Now she was back home, with Lily, living with my parents again. I'd returned for the holidays, bringing expensive gifts, part of my successful Columbia graduate persona. I'd started a promising job at a publishing house in the city, built a small circle of loyal friends, and was finally creating a life untethered from the Wilsons' approval. I thought I could handle a week in that house. I was wrong. I arrived at the Wilson family home on December 23rd, rental car packed with carefully wrapped gifts. The Connecticut winter had blanketed everything in pristine white, making the house look like something from a Hallmark movie. Perfect, as always. As I pulled into the driveway, Lily came running out without a coat, her excitement visible in the clouds of her breath. "Aunt Emma, you're here!" She crashed into my legs, and I felt that familiar ache, the love I had for this little girl who somehow escaped inheriting the Wilson coldness. "Careful, Lily," Bethany called from the doorway, martini already in hand at 2 p.m. "Don't break anything in Emma's fancy car." The passive-aggressive comments started immediately. My mother scrutinized my haircut, so urban. My father commented on my used car. "Couldn't that publishing job get you something better?" And Bethany asked if I was still single or just hiding a boyfriend from them. I had prepared myself for this, a mental armor built over years. What I wasn't prepared for was how they treated Lily. That evening, as we decorated the Christmas tree, another Wilson performance of perfect family traditions, Lily accidentally knocked over a glass ornament. The shattering sound was followed by absolute silence. "This is why we can't have nice things," Margaret sighed dramatically. "Bethany, control your daughter." Lily's bottom lip trembled. "I'm sorry, Grandma." "Sorry doesn't fix things, does it?" Robert said, his voice carrying that dangerous edge I remembered from childhood. "Actions have consequences." Later, I found Lily hiding in the window seat of the guest room, my old room, clutching a tattered stuffed rabbit. "Hey, kiddo," I said softly. "You okay?" She nodded unconvincingly. "Grandpa says I'm too clumsy." "You know what?" I sat beside her. "When I was your age, I broke things too. Everyone does." "But you're perfect," she whispered. "Mommy always says so." I nearly laughed. "Trust me, I'm not. And neither is your mom, or grandma, or grandpa. Nobody's perfect, Lily." "But you don't get in trouble." "I used to. A lot." The next day was Christmas Eve. The annual Wilson party, 40 guests from the country club, church, and my father's business associates, was in full swing. I was playing the role I'd perfected: successful daughter, charming hostess, proof of the Wilsons' generosity and good parenting. Midway through the evening, I was helping in the kitchen when I overheard Bethany in the adjacent dining room with Lily, who'd spilled cranberry sauce on the tablecloth. "Do you know how expensive this is?" Bethany hissed. "Mom's going to be furious." "I'm sorry," Lily whispered, those 2 words I'd said thousands of times. "Sorry isn't good enough. If you keep this up, you know what happens to bad children, right?" I froze, dish towel in hand. "They go back to the orphanage," came my mother's voice, joining the conversation. "But I didn't come from an orphanage," Lily said, confused. "No, but Aunt Emma did," Bethany replied. "And if she hadn't shaped up, that's exactly where she would have ended up again. Isn't that right, Mom?" "Exactly," Margaret said. "We almost sent her back when she was 8. Remember that summer? Constant tantrums." I remembered that summer. My tantrums were panic attacks after Robert had locked me in the basement for breaking a window with a baseball. "Like Aunt Emma?" Lily's tiny voice asked. "Exactly," Bethany laughed. "So clean this up now, or maybe you'll find out what it's like there, too." My hands shook as I set down the towel. The room seemed to tilt sideways. 16 years of buried rage rose within me like magma. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my old bedroom, mind racing. On my phone, I pulled up emails from Elena's attorney, documents I'd been sitting on for months, unsure what to do. The trust fund statements showed regular withdrawals for educational expenses dating back years, private school tuition that had been covered by scholarship, music lessons I'd earned through work study, even my room and board, while I was already working part-time jobs to pay for my own clothes and necessities. As I scrolled through the records, another email came in. The attorney following up on my request for information about my biological mother. Records indicate Maria Vasquez passed away when you were 5, but I've located an interesting document you should see. Attached was a scan of a handwritten letter. My hands trembled as I enlarged it on my screen. The letter was from my mother to her mother, Alina, dated just weeks before her death. In it, she mentioned that Robert and Margaret Wilson had approached her about adopting me, not through an agency or orphanage. They had specifically sought her out after seeing me at the community center where she worked as a cleaner. The room spun around me. There had never been an orphanage. It had all been a lie, a threat constructed to keep me compliant, grateful, and afraid. Christmas morning dawned bright and cold. As I walked downstairs to join the family for breakfast and presents, I felt strangely calm. Today would change everything. Christmas morning in the Wilson household had always been a performance. Everyone in matching pajamas, carefully orchestrated present opening, followed by Margaret's famous breakfast casserole. This year was no different, except for the storm brewing inside me. "Emma, you're looking pale," my mother commented as I entered the living room. "Did you not sleep well?" "I had a lot to think about," I replied, accepting the coffee Robert handed me. Lily was already by the tree, eyes wide at the mountain of presents. Bethany sat nearby, scrolling through her phone. "Can I open one, please?" Lily asked. "Let's wait for Grandma's Christmas toast," Robert said. Margaret appeared with her casserole, setting it on the dining table with ceremonial precision. "Everyone gather round," she called. "Family tradition." As we assembled, I noticed how Lily stood slightly apart, already learning to take up less space, just like I had. Margaret raised her mimosa. "To another blessed Christmas in our beautiful home. We're so fortunate to have our family together, especially Emma, who, despite her unconventional start, has become a credit to the Wilson name." My father and sister murmured in agreement. Lily looked confused. "What does unconventional mean?" she whispered to me. "It means different," I told her. "It means I wasn't born a Wilson." "Would you like to say something, Emma?" Margaret prompted, eyebrows raised in expectation of my usual grateful response. "Actually, I would." I set down my coffee cup. "I'd like to give my present to Lily first, if that's okay." Bethany frowned. "We always open in age order, Emma. You know that. This one's special." I retrieved a small, elegantly wrapped box from under the tree and handed it to Lily. "Go ahead, sweetheart." As Lily carefully unwrapped the gift, my parents exchanged glances. Inside was a silver locket with a tiny key charm attached. "It's beautiful," Lily gasped. "Open it," I encouraged. Inside was a photo of a smiling woman with dark hair like mine, like Lily's. On the other side was a small inscription: "Family is truth, not fear." "Who's that lady?" Lily asked. "That's my mother, my birth mother. Her name was Maria." I took a deep breath. "And she never gave me up to an orphanage." The room went silent. Margaret's smile froze. "What are you talking about, Emma?" Robert's voice had that dangerous edge. "I'm talking about the lie you've been telling for 16 years. I turned to Lily. "There was no orphanage, sweetheart. That's a story they made up to scare me, and now they're using it to scare you." "Emma," Margaret hissed, "this is completely inappropriate." "No, what's inappropriate is threatening a 6-year-old child with abandonment." I pulled out my phone. "I have proof that you approached my dying mother directly. You knew she had cancer. You knew she was desperate to find a home for me before she died." Bethany stood up abruptly. "Lily, go to your room." "No," I said firmly. "Let her stay. She deserves to know what kind of family she's being raised in." "How dare you?" Robert thundered, rising from his chair. "After everything we've done for you." "Done for me?" I laughed, a sound without humor. "Let's talk about what you've really done." I placed a folder on the table. "These are statements from the trust fund my grandmother established for me. The one you've been stealing from since I was 8 years old." Margaret's face drained of color. "That money was for your care. It was for my education and well-being, not for your vacation home or Bethany's failed boutique." I turned to my sister. "Did you know about this?" The flash of guilt across her face told me everything. "You did. Of course you did." I shook my head. "And still, you thought it was okay to use the orphanage threat on Lily to continue the cycle of fear?" "It was just discipline," Bethany muttered. "Kids need consequences." Consequences or control? I knelt beside Lily, who was watching with wide eyes. "The key on your locket is symbolic, Lily. It means you always have the power to unlock the truth and free yourself from fear." "This is ridiculous," Robert sputtered. "You're upsetting everyone on Christmas morning with these accusations." "They're not accusations when I have proof." I stood up, suddenly feeling taller than I ever had in this house. "The attorney has copies of everything. The trust fund embezzlement, the circumstances of my adoption, all of it." "What do you want?" Margaret asked, her voice suddenly small. "Money?" "I want you to never threaten Lily with abandonment again. I want you to acknowledge what you did to me, the psychological abuse, the threats, the stealing." I looked around at the perfect Christmas scene, now fractured beyond repair. "And I want you to understand that family isn't something you can unchoose when it's inconvenient." The silence that followed was deafening. Lily clutched her locket, looking between all of us with confusion and the beginning of understanding. "I'm leaving now," I said quietly. "Lily, you can call me anytime. Remember what I said about the key." As I gathered my coat and bag, no one moved to stop me. At the door, I turned back one last time. "Merry Christmas," I said. "May we all find peace with the truth." As I walked to my car through the gently falling snow, I heard the front door open behind me. I turned, half expecting, maybe hoping, to see my parents rushing to apologize. Instead, it was Lily, still in her pajamas, barefoot in the snow. "Aunt Emma, wait," she called, running toward me. "Are you coming back?" I knelt down to her level. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I'll always be your aunt, no matter what." She hugged me fiercely. "I want to be brave like you." "You already are," I whispered, as Bethany appeared in the doorway, calling Lily's name. I drove away, hands shaking on the steering wheel, leaving behind the only family I'd known, but taking with me, for the first time, the power of truth. The week after Christmas passed in a blur. Back in my New York apartment, I alternated between feeling powerful and terrified. What had I done? Had I gone too far? Not far enough? I checked my phone constantly, half expecting angry calls from Robert or tearful manipulation from Margaret. Instead, on New Year's Eve, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "It's Beth. We need to talk." Bethany had never called herself Beth before. It was always the full Bethany, proper and Wilson approved. This small change intrigued me enough to agree to meet her at a coffee shop near my apartment the next day. She arrived looking different, hair pulled back simply, minimal makeup, nothing like her usual polished appearance. She carried a large manila envelope. "You look like hell," was her greeting as she slid into the booth across from me. "Nice to see you too." "I'm not here to fight," she said, surprising me. "I'm here because everything fell apart after you left." She explained that our parents had gone into damage control mode immediately. Robert had called their attorney, frantically trying to determine their legal exposure for the trust fund misappropriation. Margaret had broken down completely, cycling between rage and despair. "Dad wanted to paint you as unstable, making up stories," Bethany said, stirring her coffee absently. "But Mom knew that wouldn't work, not with the documents you have." "And what about you?" I asked. "Where do you stand in all this?" She looked up, her eyes, so like our father's, suddenly vulnerable. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about how they raised us, about how I treated you. And I was awful." She pushed the envelope toward me. This is everything I could find about the trust fund. Bank statements, transfer records, everything. I took them from Dad's study. I stared at her, speechless. The day after Christmas, Lily asked me if I was going to send her away too. Bethany continued, voice breaking slightly. She was packing a little backpack with her favorite things, just in case. Do you know what that feels like? To realize your child is afraid you'll abandon her? Actually, I do, I said quietly. She flinched. I deserved that. It's not about what you deserve, Beth. It's about breaking the cycle. We talked for hours, really talked, maybe for the first time ever. She told me how our parents had always pitted us against each other, how she'd been jealous of my resilience, my talents, the way I somehow thrived despite everything, how she'd failed at college, at marriage, at her business, always trying to live up to impossible Wilson standards. They're in couples therapy now, she said with a bitter laugh. Can you believe it? Margaret Wilson admitting she needs help? And what about you? We're staying with my friend Jess for now. I couldn't be in that house anymore. She hesitated. I've been looking at apartments near here, actually, in Brooklyn. You're moving to New York? I need a fresh start, away from their influence. She met my eyes directly. And Lily needs her aunt. 2 weeks later, I met with Elena's attorney again. With the documents Bethany had provided, we had a solid case against my parents for financial restitution, but I wasn't interested in a lengthy legal battle. I want to settle, I told him, on my terms. My terms were simple. They would repay the trust with interest, establish a college fund for Lily, and agree to family counseling if they wanted any relationship with either of us moving forward. In return, I wouldn't pursue legal charges. They agreed with surprising speed. I later learned from Bethany that the threat of scandal in their social circles was far more terrifying to them than financial penalties. By spring, Bethany and Lily were settled in a cozy Brooklyn apartment 10 minutes from mine. Bethany had found work as an office manager at a small design firm, her first job without parental connections, and was thriving. Lily had started at a new school where no one knew the Wilsons or their expectations. One warm April evening, as Lily and I planted herbs on Bethany's tiny balcony garden, my phone rang with a Connecticut number. My mother, calling for our weekly check-in, part of the counseling agreement. Our conversations were still awkward, layered with decades of hurt, but something was shifting. Last week, she had actually apologized, not with qualifiers or excuses, but simply and directly for the orphanage threats. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Grandma wants to know if we're coming for Easter, Lily reported after chatting with Margaret. Bethany and I exchanged glances. What do you think? I asked. I think, Bethany said carefully, that we can visit on our terms now, as equals, not subordinates. That summer brought another surprise. The attorney contacted me about additional documents found in Elena's effects. Letters from distant cousins in Arizona, photos of my mother as a young woman, even a recording of her voice singing a lullaby in Spanish. Pieces of my history I never thought I'd recover. I also discovered that Elena had established a scholarship fund in my mother's name at the community college she'd attended briefly. With part of my trust fund, I expanded it, creating opportunities for single mothers seeking education. As for Robert and Margaret, our relationship remained complicated. They were trying in their limited way. Robert had stepped down from his firm's leadership, citing a desire to focus on family. Margaret had stopped chairing quite so many committees. Small changes, but significant for people so set in their ways. The most unexpected development came from Lily. She'd started asking questions about her own father, whom she barely remembered. Bethany had always been evasive, embarrassed by the failed relationship. But inspired by my search for truth, she reached out to him. To everyone's surprise, Jack Sullivan had been trying to reconnect for years, his letters intercepted by my parents who deemed him unsuitable. He was now a stable, married high school teacher in Rhode Island with 2 stepchildren. When he learned about Lily, he wept. Their reunion was tentative at first, supervised visits, careful conversations. But by Thanksgiving, we had expanded our unconventional family circle to include Jack, his wife Diane, and their children. We gathered at my apartment, Bethany and Lily, Jack and his family, even Robert and Margaret, on their best behavior, for a meal that bore little resemblance to the sterile Wilson holidays of my childhood. As we sat around my mismatched furniture, eating from borrowed dishes, I caught Bethany's eye across the table. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Remember what you said about the key?" Lily asked me later, still wearing the locket I'd given her. "About unlocking the truth?" "I do." "I think we all got unlocked," she said, with the simple wisdom of children. "Like in your story, we were all locked up by lies, and now we're free. Out of the mouths of babes, as they say." She was right. The trust fund money had never been the real inheritance from my grandmother. The true gift had been the truth itself, and the courage to speak it. It's been 3 years since that Christmas morning when I finally stood up for myself, and for Lily. Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed. Last month, Bethany and I took Lily to Arizona to visit Elena's grave and meet my mother's cousins. Standing there in the desert sunshine, surrounded by family I never knew I had, I felt my mother's presence so strongly. The Wilsons aren't perfect now. No family is. But we're honest with each other. The walls built on lies and threats have crumbled, making space for something authentic to grow in their place. Lily wears her locket every day, a reminder that truth is stronger than fear. I learned that family isn't just about blood or legal documents. It's about choosing each other, day after day, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. And sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to accept conditional love. If you're watching this and something in my story resonates with you, remember, you deserve to be loved without fear. You deserve the truth. And sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for others too. If this story meant something to you, please subscribe to hear more journeys of truth and healing. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. Because none of us are. Not really. We're all just looking for our true home, our real family, our authentic selves. And sometimes we have to break things to rebuild them stronger.